Good evening and welcome to today's session on BIC streams, courage, conviction, controversy, and cricket lore and more. Joining us today are our panelists Vijay Lokapalli, Vedam Jayashankar, and Shavir Tarapur. Thank you so much for doing this for us. Before I hand over to Vijay, a few instructions. For those of you who are here for the first time, and may want to receive updates from us, you can do so by visiting our website or follow us on our social media channels, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. With that, over to you, Vijay.
Welcome, good evening, Vedam and Shabir, to this wonderful session. Congratulations, Vedam, on this book, which is so very well researched. And I finished it in one go because I knew you would do justice. And some of the really new aspects I found about these controversies. And also, welcome, Shabir. This is the first time we are on the platform together. And of course, Vedam, we've traveled together on many tours, been roommates. I would never have imagined sitting in Trinidad that in 1997, that's many years down the road, we would be sitting on this panel and discussing a book written by you. So well done, Vedam. I would love to ask.
Thank you very much for all those kind words, Vijay.
No. You've been a wonderful journalist. Can we begin? If Vedam, can you just take us on a short journey on what prompted you to have this book? I mean, on controversies, because cricket thrives on controversy. We have known cricket to be full of controversies on and off the field. So what was it that led you to think of this book?
First of all, thank you very much, Vijay Lokapalli, for all those kind words that you mentioned. Yes, it was a great pleasure covering a lot of cricket with you all over the world. And I always recall that with very fond memories. The original idea when we wanted to write this book was to come up with a book full of controversies. Because like you said, controversy sells a lot. But then afterwards, after some time, we gave it a thought. And I thought, if I write a book full of controversies, it would become a very, very dark book. And that's not what I had in mind. Because A, I'm not that sort of a writer. And the second part is too many controversies actually can put people off. And sport is not only about controversies. Sport is a lot about, about winning, about losing, and about somebody, beating the odds to come up trumps. And then there's a lot of courage involved in it. So finally, I got into this courage, conviction, and controversy. And somehow that name stuck, and we added "and cricket" into it because then it would, otherwise it would look like maybe some Kargil Heights book. So we didn't want that. We wanted to emphasize that it was about cricket. So we got this courage, conviction, and controversy. And the name stuck. That name really stuck.
Yeah. Shavir, your impressions of your first impressions of the book?
Yeah, I mean, at the outset, firstly, let me thank everyone and especially Vedam in having me on this panel of all the elite people. And especially where books are concerned on cricket and all, though I'm a great avid follower of the game. And when Vedam did ask me at the first opportunity, I jumped and said, yes, I will do it. At that moment of time, frankly speaking, I had not really got a hard copy of that, but I managed to get one. And it till date now, it's a real pleasure read. It's not too heavy either. And what really has impressed me about this book is the way he has put it forth and made it very easy for the reader. In the sense, there may be some chapters that you don't really have to do too much of deep reading to understand. And you could, move on. You could always go to the last chapter and come back again in between to read another chapter, which really caught my eye about the book. And of course, knowing Vedam and his style of writing over the years, I've also read what he has done earlier also. I found that he has done a lot of hard work into it, especially when things he's gone back to the 30s and the 40s and things like that. So I think a lot of history also has been brought into this book. So I think Vedam, fantastic job. and it's made great reading. Though I haven't, to be frank, I've not finished it because I've got a few more chapters which I've left off in between. But it's a great book, and as I said, very enjoyable read because you really don't have to, sort of go chapter to chapter. It's not sequential. It's, you can go from one chapter to another, so that makes it very easy for the reader. Well done, Vedam.
Yeah, that's what I remember when Vedam told me about the book.
Thank you, Shavir.
He said, Vijay, you can just start anywhere. I mean, I was wondering what kind of a book would this be that I can start from anywhere. And when I got the book, believe me, he has covered every aspect of all the controversies cricket has known, and beginning with the body line, which really threatened to split the cricket world, and it was probably the nastiest of series one can imagine. So Vedam, what kind of research? I mean, how much time did it take, and how was your research done? Do you have a collection of books, or you visited libraries, or how? I mean, because there are some very little known details in the book.
Yeah, actually, what propelled me to write this sort of a book was the chapters. What we chose. Still, like I said sometime earlier to you, Vijay, we had about 250 or odd controversies and incidents to go through. But obviously, I couldn't write on 250. So finally, with a lot of whittling down, we settled down on 40 odd it is. But what really I wanted to do was uh, uh, every particular chapter, every incident had to cover something, which meant that maybe it led to a change in the laws of the game, maybe it led to a change in format of the game, or maybe it led to a change in protocol as far as the game was concerned. So that was the thing that I really wanted to do. And when you look at it from, like you mentioned, like from Bodyline, because Bodyline set the tone really. Till then, everybody said that if you're a gentleman, you don't do X thing. If you're a gentleman, you. But I think Douglas Jardine really changed that, and because he was gunning for Bradman, and that changed. Actually, like if you look at every chapter, like Shavir says, you don't need to really review the chapters.
Yeah, yeah. Shabir, what is your view? I mean, do you believe that cricket needed controversies, or they just happened? I mean, because the nature of the sport. To me, the real gentlemen are the umpires on the field, because they absorb everything, right? And they never protest. They don't have a platform to protest. They have to bear with all the whatever happens. But do you believe that cricket needed such controversies to thrive?
See, in fact, I would put it not only where cricket is concerned, in any walk of life. I feel that people don't go looking for controversies. It's a matter of a situational segment. Depending upon the situation, maybe a controversy may arise. So absolutely, it's a game played at the highest level, and countries are involved, states are involved. So obviously, from time to time, controversies will crop up, and that is where our role, as you said, umpires, we play a very big role over there, trying to sort of play down the controversy or the situation as it may be under the gambit of the law, as well as the playing conditions that are given to us. That's a tool that we have to use in our job. So controversies, yes, and at times controversies are good for the game also. It takes away, maybe a board situation, a situation where you're not going anywhere, and something crops up, and especially, I mean, we are talking about like Vedam said, the Bodyline series. Of course, in those days we didn't have the digital world, we didn't have cameras, etc. So it was quite obviously that you had to take it as it comes, and probably there are certain incidents where that are planned earlier, and then the controversy becomes a little more than what it should be.
Yeah, Vedam, would you agree with Shavir's views that on controversy impacting the game? And there is a chapter you have discussed how
Yeah,
it led to changes in the laws of the game. So if you can just throw some light on it.
yeah, actually, if you really look at it, controversies, when you say detached from it and look at it after some time, it actually helped the game grow. It changed the format of the game. Like for instance, the Bodyline, which you brought out, they were bowling so many bouncers and beamers at that time. And the law of the game changed. They said that not more than two people behind the popping crease, because when Bodyline was bowled, there were even 4 or 5 people or even 6 people on the leg side. And I think at one stage there were 8 people on the leg side, 8 fielders on the leg side. There was just one person on the off side. It was that bad, it was. And it changed a whole lot of things. So you couldn't have more than 2 people behind a popping crease. So if you really look at it, even Kerry Packer series was such a controversial series. But when you look back at it, look at the amount of good it has given the game. You have colored clothing, you have white balls, you have day-night cricket, you have drop-in pitches, which is a great thing actually. And then you have that inner circle, the outer circle, a whole lot of things. Kerry Packer series at that time was very controversial and a lot of people didn't like it. But over a period of time, actually, it did a lot of good for the game. So that way, there are many instances which were controversial at that time. But as time passed, we actually saw that these controversies helped us actually to improve the game and for it to evolve.
I agree on that point, definitely.
Yeah, Shavit, do you think that cricket, very traditional, steeped in traditions, needed this kind of what should I say, goading from off the field? I mean, all these controversies leading to so many changes within the game.
Yes, I mean, of course, because of something happening in hindsight, and then the people involved and the lawmakers and etc. had to probably sit down and put their heads together to make the minimum changes in the laws. And earlier on, everything was played only under the laws of cricket. Now, as time has changed, the game has changed. There are various types of cricket that is being played. Not only the traditional white clothing. Now it's gone into 50 overs cricket, has now become 20 overs cricket. So depending upon each scenario, the changes were needed. And I think we have come to a stage now where, like Vedam was talking about, Kerry Packer series. Like I remember, like when initially when the DRS came into play, there were a lot of people who didn't want it. They felt that it may not be good for the game. But as time evolved, the game moved on, more technology came into the game. And now everyone is accepting DRS, including the players. When in those days, when it first started, some of the top players didn't want DRS. But now it's made, and the general opinion and only advantage that I've had is because I've used DRS and I've stood on the field and all that. I found that once everyone started accepting it, the game has become much more fairer. It's not only because of the DRS, because of the technology and the more viewership everyone are able to see. So people, whenever the changes come, there are a few section of, there are people who may not like those changes. Like going back to Kerry Packer, what I know about Kerry Packer, and maybe now I've read in the Vedam's book too, I felt that the traditionalists didn't want to, from the white clothing and the red ball, go into something like, colored clothing and a white ball and a black side screen. But then people accepted it.
Yeah. So, Vedam, the game has evolved a lot. So, how much of credit would you give to all these controversies? I mean, have they contributed? To popularize the sport, which has 3 formats? I mean, it for a sport, for a game which is not a body contact sport. It's not a contact sport. So, is that one reason why we have had so many incidents where they're not able to? Normally, I think a boxer would pound his opponent and give vent to his anger. But here, I think you explode suddenly, and that becomes a controversy on the field.
Yeah, Vijay, I agree with you a lot on that. But when you look at a guy like Gilchrist, Roy Gilchrist, the West Indian fast bowler. I mean, he went mad. He really went crazy. He just didn't bother who it was.
Yeah.
And there's so many instances of Gilchrist bowling from even 18 yards and bowling beamers at the batsman. So I think, yeah, in certain ways, maybe a spinner cannot express himself if he gets too angry. But you really would not like to get a fast bowler like Gilchrist, or even now any of these really quick fast bowlers with their even with all your protective gear. I don't think you'd be interested in riling them up. Yeah, but you're right. Cricket is a non-contact sport, and it should remain a non-contact sport, because if you want contact sport, there are other contact sports which you can indulge in. This is a non-contact sport, and it has its own beauty, and I think it should stay that way.
Yeah. And Shavir, those images of Javed Miandad raising his bat against Dennis Lillee or Michael Holding, a wonderful athlete and such a gentleman cricketer, otherwise losing his temper and kicking the stumps. So what would have been your reaction had you been the umpire there? I mean, how would you have sort of handled it?
It's a tough question to answer, as because I mean, I've been lucky in my career that I've not come across such incidents on the field. I mean, except a little bit of sledging, etc. But getting physical and pulling out stumps is something that I've not come across.
Yeah.
But as I said earlier, it's all depends upon the situation, what you have within you, what at that moment of time would have I would have handled the situation then. So I know it's it's a very difficult thing to envisage as what I would have done or
Yeah.
anybody would have done unless you were there.
Would you have if the ICC had given you the power to send them off, like there was a proposal sometime back to handle these controversies by using the red card as you have in hockey and football. So would you have preferred that red card coming into play?
That's why I said it all depends on the weapon and the tools that are given to you to
Yeah.
act with. So if something was there at that time, I would have definitely done it. I mean, just in a lighter vein, we are talking about the higher thing about sending a player off.
Yes.
I had done it in a local league match itself, though I didn't have the tool, but that was the situation then. So
Did you send off the players?
yes, a player.
A player.
So
Okay.
because at that time the situation demanded something like that.
Right. And Vedam, in your career, would you have come across a situation where you would have thought, yes, okay, yes, here the umpire should have sent off this player? Can you remember quickly?
When I played, you're asking when I
Played
played?
or when we were reporting?
I think, I mean, it's one of the most disgusting things which happened. I was captaining a side, and I was in slips, and actually this bowler, he appealed. The batsman was out. That umpire said something very ridiculous. He actually abused the bowler for appealing, and he actually called him a blind man or something like that. But everything happened in seconds. It's just bowler just turned around and slapped him. And I got horrified. And I sent the bowler off the field. I said, it's not accepted. You can't do this. It was very embarrassing for me. And of course, this was much earlier, even before I became a journalist. And the bowler actually is a very nice guy. But for him to overreact like that was absolutely shocking. And I think that's the only time really that where I have been involved in. I've seen violence so badly in a match that I've played. But otherwise, if you really look at it, there's one instance about a Ranji Trophy match between West Zone and North Zone, which finally had to be abandoned. And that was really a shameful affair where I think Rashid Patel, who ran behind the batsman with the stump
Raman
in
Lamba.
hand. Raman Lamba with the stump in hand. That was quite No, I was saying that what Shabir mentioned, I remember that Shabir's colleague Kulkarni sent off Sanjay Manjrekar out of the ground. And it's there in the book. I mentioned that in the book about that instance. And I think these are some of the bad instances, like Inzamamul Haq, who went into the crowd with a bat in hand. He wanted to beat up somebody because they had called him Alu or something. Or I think Kepler Vessels, who kicked Kapil Dev. There's so many bad instances in the game, and it's unfortunate. And these are not the controversies that you would like to take with you. But I think what has happened is, again, since it's not a body contact sport, they have brought, I think it's a level 3 or a level 4 offense I can't remember. Shavir would
Level
throw
3.
light on that, but I think
Yeah.
yeah, it's a level 3 offense, and so that's good. So even the laws of the game. See, what has happened today is cricket was a game which mentioned only about the laws, but the spirit of the game was left to the players. But now the spirit of the game is actually encoded into the laws of the game. You know, the 2000 laws, actually, Shavir will throw better light on that. But the 2000 MCC code, laws of the game, actually encodes a lot of the spirit. And that's a sad part. It should have been left as a gentleman's sport. But I think things just got out of hand and they had to encode the spirit into the laws of the game.
I want Vedam you to answer this. Did it come because of the commercialization of the sport, which could put so much of pressure on the players to perform, and they would go to any extent to sort of motivate themselves to get the best results? And then this scrutiny of the players, there are so many cameras watching every little moment, and do you think would that be one of the reasons?
I think that is at a later stage, at a higher stage when you play international cricket. But I think a lot of these things have to be actually in coach and by the team. See, these are the values of the game because cricket is a great game. It teaches you a lot about values. And that's the values that a coach has to imbibe in a young player because everybody wants to win, everybody is aggressive, but it's the coach's job. A good coach is one who can imbibe even the values. You may not become a great cricketer, but you can definitely take those values into life. And I think at the lowest level, in fact, at the school level, the coach, the teachers, they have to imbibe this spirit of the game and teach them about the spirit of the game. And these values that you learn on the sports field are values for life. And that's very important because it's guys who cheat at that level who will always cheat throughout their life.
Yeah, I think Shabir, if you would like to contribute here, because Bangalore has a history of producing some amazingly grounded cricketers, right from Mr. G.R. Vishwanath to Rahul Dravid, Kumble, Sunil Joshi, Venkatesh Prasad. I mean, they have played the game with great dignity. I mean, never been involved in any controversy. So, how much is it because of the grooming by the state association?
Yeah, of course, to a greater extent, it is of course the individual's background that they come from also, and here also the education part also plays a very big role for the individual, and along the way it's also left up to the individual to through his career to find out. He makes his own decisions, what is right, what is wrong, how to play the game in the right spirit, etc. But coming back to what you asked Vedam a little earlier regarding the commercialization of the game, etc., that is one of the reasons. But moreover, is because we were seeing on the field of cricket a lot of may not be a lot of physical contact between players, etc. But time had come. The times we have seen where players have misbehaved with their opponents. They have misbehaved with their own teammates. And if you really go into the preamble of the laws of the game, it says, "I have respect for your opponents as well as for your own team members." So it had gone to that. So I think that is what really sort of pushed the lawmakers into going into making a specific law and imbibing all the penalties, not only, if not only in the laws of cricket, but mainly to in the playing conditions of the game. So I think, yeah, it has come along because of the many cases that we had seen. I mean, if you go back and see, we had that earlier issue between Michael Slater and Rahul Dravid in one of the test matches and things like that. At that time, there were not many stringent playing conditions or laws at that time. So from time to time, it has moved ahead, and I think the lawmakers and the ICC people have been forced to inculcate all these things into that more as a deterrent than really using it as a tool to punish the players. Unless there's a line between. I mean, that's what we call in our umpiring parnell. That there's a line between really saying that you've crossed the line or you're well within the limit. So once you've crossed the line, then obviously you've got to face the music, whoever it be.
Yeah, Vedam, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about, see, when you look at the Karnataka cricketers, I'm sorry if I'm not being parochial, but I need to point out something. If you look at the Karnataka cricketers, so let's say Rahul Dravid, but the same can be said for G.R. Vishwanath or Chandrasekhar or Kirmani or a whole lot of others. If you look at Rahul Dravid, he could not have been anything else. He could not have behaved any worse or any better because the environment that he is brought up in, and the culture he is brought up in, he could have been only that. He's such a gentleman on the ground and off the field, but that's because of the culture. It's not just to do with cricketers. If you look about a whole lot of sportsmen, including let's say Prakash Padukone, for instance, because that's the values that is being built in because of the environment. Maybe it's not a very aggressive environment as far as, like you said, body contact and other things, but it's the right environment. Now take Shavir Tarapur. His father was a great coach. And his father, whether it rained or not, you had to come to the ground. And if it rained, he would teach you lessons. This is what you learned. It was not that, okay, it's rain, no practice today. He would keep you there for those 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever and teach you lessons and tell you how you have to behave, what you have to do, how you have to show respect. So that is something which, a whole lot of these people went through that. And Keki Tarapur, he was also my coach. And I know that how much he worked hard to teach those values to the players. And a whole lot of players that you see today, even though Keki has passed away, there are a whole lot of them understand the culture. So it's very important for a senior player to hand over the right culture, become the right role model for the junior players. And I think Karnataka has done that much better than some of the other states. I'm not being parochial, but I'm just pointing out that.
Yeah, fine. Vedam, can I take you back to the book? Which chapter would appeal to you more? I mean, they're all very, very readable chapters. And which chapter actually posed you the biggest challenge in terms of gathering information and putting it together to compile it in this form?
See, if you ask me the chapter that I really like, it was the Packer series, because I think Packer series made a great impact on the game. We may look at it, we were horrified when it actually was taking place, but later, say 10 years down the line, we actually thought that it made a lot of change to the game. And that really had a great impact, because let's not forget, cricket at that time was dying. It was really dying, and Kerry Packer gave it a great what you call shot in the arm, and that changed a lot. The toughest chapter, if you ask me, would be the match fixing chapter. It is really horrifying that a game you followed from childhood, and people should be proud to play for their country, really proud to play for it, and to think that they would let down their own country and the game that they played in. That was a little difficult to comprehend. But I went through the inquiry committee reports of all the various countries, and it was all the same. And the South African inquiry committee, although it nailed Hansi Cronje for a while, was actually the worst, because they let him off the hook. First and foremost, they fixed 3 reference points, and if people talked about something which happened earlier or something or outside those 3 series, the judge would say, no, that's not part of the reference point. Don't do that. It's not our thing. Don't talk about it. The same way when everybody damned Hansi Cronje, everybody, his player, his coach, everybody damned him. Suddenly the South African government and the South African judge and the justice system told him that they said they offered immunity. They said, you will get immunity if you tell the truth. I mean, what truth? Everybody had already damned him. And they turned around and said, the truth will set you free. I mean, that's quite ridiculous. Of course, the other chapter is the Greg Chappell and Sourav Ganguly chapter. And I think that's the biggest chapter in the entire book. I've been very fair. I've been very fair. Somebody who is a Ganguly fan would probably curse me for being pro Greg Chappell, and somebody who is a Greg Chappell fan would curse me for being pro Ganguly. But I can tell you, I've been very fair, and I've presented both sides of the picture, and I've tried not to get too close to the subject, because I would not have been objective otherwise. And I think that was a tough chapter to write, but I think that was a good chapter also.
Shavir, Vedam speaks a lot about this Kerry Packer series. It brought in colored clothing, it brought in white ball cricket, like you said, the black side screen, and cricket under floodlights. So what was your experience of your first floodlit match? I mean, how different was it, and was it difficult?
You mean while umpiring?
Yes, umpiring. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. There was no doubt about it. I can still recollect that game at the Chinnaswamy Stadium when I umpired first time under lights. And I was very, I mean, I had butterflies in my stomach. I mean, anyone would, because of the total change in from what you've been doing over the years and all of a sudden getting into something new. Okay, fair enough. But what I found most difficult at that time was, especially in that game, was initially I was finding it very difficult to spot the ball. You know, sight the ball from leaving from the time it leaves the bowler's hand. As matter of practice in umpiring, you always try and everyone has a different ways of doing it, but I had my way of doing it. I would try and spot the line of the ball right from try and as far as possible from release. So initially, I was finding it very difficult, and I could make out that I maybe at that time I may have missed something. I mean, luckily it was just a domestic game, and I may have missed something at the beginning of the game. But then it became easier as the game progressed. It became easier. But one thing I would like to draw the attention of everybody here: lighting, differs from ground to ground. It also depends upon the shadows. Sometimes certain stadiums, the roofing is a little long, so it all depends upon how the lights are situated. But all said and done over there, it takes time, and it definitely took me time to get adjusted to it. I think maybe the first half of the game, I was still not very sure of whether I'd done a proper job till then or not. But luckily, my partner and the people inside later on at the time of the interval told me, so far so good, don't worry about it. And then things became more comfortable. It's like a player, I'm sure, who first time went into bat or bat under lights would have had the same feeling. So even when umpiring, it was a new concept, a new thing. So it took time to adjust to it.
Right. Vedam, you have said that the gravest threat to cricket was the match fixing saga. Would it be should I say, did it pose more threat than a greater threat than the Bodyline series, or maybe the Monkey Gate, where it was actually very well handled by Anil Kumble, and that also would have become a major issue. And also, if you remember the India-South Africa Test match, which was abandoned, or the England-Pakistan Test match.
See, actually, Vijay, when you look at all these instances that you quoted, they were more or less one-on-one. Even that Monkey Gate was really between, let's say, India and Australia at the most. It is match fixing which became universal. And as you read that, you realize that virtually every country, some player or the other was involved. And if they had got away with it, it would have become worse and worse, and people would have lost not only interest in the game, the credibility was the game. Credibility is a great currency. If you don't have credibility, then everything else falls apart. And as far as cricket was concerned, it would have lost credibility. And the game itself would have died. There's no doubt about it. They would have killed the game and it would have been over. So I think the match, there was some inquiry. Some people were punished and some people got off on a technicality. And that's also come out in the book because people were not let go free. They got off on a technicality, and that's well mentioned. In fact, even where the Indian thing is concerned, Nandan Kamath, very well known sports advocate, lawyer, he's brought it out very well on the technicality that lets some of the Indian players off. So it was not just the Indian players, the Pakistanis. I mean, Pakistan was horrifying to read about the Pakistan. And we're not making it up. We are quoting from the Pakistan Match Fixing Report, Inquiry Commission. And it is horrifying. Can you imagine a player being told to go and collect 40 lakhs from XYZ and collect a car and then join a team? I mean, that was crazy. So I think, that was the gravest thing. And the other things, I think it was bilateral or it was within 1-on-1. And it could have been, some disciplining could have sorted it out. But match fixing was really bad.
Yeah, and Vedam also, if you can just share, which is one chapter which is very close to you. I mean, in terms of writing in terms of gathering information. You've talked about match fixing chapter, yes, but which to you is the one you would say you would recommend me to read first if I had not read the book?
That's a real tough question because it's not just about the controversy. There's a lot of courage involved. There's a lot of conviction and there's a lot of courage of conviction. See, one of the things that I brought out, of course, Tiger Pataudi and B.S. Chandrasekhar, amazing tales of courage. Amazing to have their kind of handicap and still play cricket at the highest level. It's mind-boggling what Pataudi or B.S. Chandrasekhar achieved. We may never even see that kind of a thing. But I would also try to bring you back to the Rahul Dravid declaration. You cannot declare a team, the country score. With Sachin Tendulkar batting on 194 in Pakistan, for you to declare and get away with, I say get away with it deliberately because at that time Sachin Tendulkar was everybody's hero, he was everybody's hero. But what carried the day for Rahul Dravid was his personal integrity. He had tremendous personal integrity and nobody ever doubted that he had done it with the best of intentions. If he didn't have that kind of personal integrity, then they would have cast aspersions on him. But that didn't happen because his personal integrity was impeccable, and that carried the day for him. And look, at the end of the day, what were we looking at? We were looking at India winning for the first time ever in Pakistan. And that's what happened. We won the test for the first time in over 50 years. And that was totally thanks to Rahul Dravid, not just the declaration, the image that he portrayed at that time, the intention that he portrayed at that time, the steeliness in his actions and in the decisions that he portrayed. And everybody within the team and the Pakistanis knew that they were here to do business. The Indian team was here to do business, not just come and while away their time. The message it sent across was amazing. And I think maybe if you have to read a chapter, maybe that you could start with that.
Shabir, I would love to know from you how you read Rahul Dravid, like Vedam has pointed out, impeccable as far as cricket is concerned. We have known him we've traveled with him, spent a lot of time with him, but you have known him right from his formative years in cricket. So if you can just tell us something about Dravid, some aspect which we don't know.
I can go back to the times when, as a youngster, Rahul, when he was with St. Joseph's Boys High School, at that time European High School or Boys High School, and my dad was coaching the school team. And it was from then that I realized that my dad used to always come home and talk to us. At that time, my younger brother also was around. He used to come and always tell us that there's one boy from St. Joseph's Boys High School who would always make it very big in the field of cricket. And then later on, when Rahul used to come with his father to my house, and interact with dad and all that, that's when I started coming to know Rahul better. In the sense that, obviously, like Vedam keeps saying that his background, his environment, he always was, very down to earth. I would use that word, down to earth. And I'm sure even till date, he's just the same. He is very approachable. You can always talk to him, on various aspects. So in that way, I was lucky that I had a few interactions with Rahul. And also, one thing stands out. I still remember the India versus Kenya ODI that was played in Bangalore. And I happened to be the TV umpire in that game. Of course, in those days, we used to tape the match in the TV umpire's room on the VHF. And in that game, Rahul struggled a little bit against the left arm spinner, I think Asif, I can't get his full name, from Kenya. And next day or maybe a day later, 2 days later, he was back at home talking to my dad as to what went wrong in that innings. So, he always had that he would always come back to whoever he found the confidence in to talk about his game or to, he's done it all over right throughout his career. But I can talk because I know he used to come home and talk to dad and things like that. And this one incident really stood out for me, that even though after representing the country, playing at the highest level, he still come back to his coach at that time to sort of try and find out what went wrong a day or two prior when that innings he played that innings, and he was struggling against the left arm spinner. So that's something that has really stuck in my mind also, and that's what I can say about Rahul Dravid.
Yeah, Vedam, there is. I was going through the questions in the list, and one of the listeners, viewers, what should I say? He wants to know, Vidyadhar. He wants to know which 3 chapters would you recommend to be read first?
Look, like I said earlier, there is no thread in the book. You know,
Right.
each is like, let's look at it this way. Each is like a short story. You know, you can pick
Exactly.
up any chapter at any time and read anything. So I would say just go through 83 chapters.
Yeah, right. And Shabir, I mean, I remember once reading, of course, Lala Amarnath being sent back from a tour, and there is in this book you have Roy Gilchrist being packed off for insubordination. Uh, 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 as an umpire, I mean, do you think? I mean, I leave it to you if you wish to skip the question. Do you think you need more? Are the laws enough today to bring in discipline, or there is something you would love to introduce or suggest?
See, the two gentlemen that you mentioned was not exactly an umpiring call that you make,
Yeah.
or as per by laws of the game or the playing conditions,
Yes.
because that was more of a national call, or their board had to take that call.
Yes.
Okay, but coming back to whether anything more can be, any more stringent rules can be made, I would say at present, what is being used, uh, as I said earlier in my one of my the things saying that now all these things are now become more of a deterrent. Everything's coming in writing now, more as a deterrent, hoping that the players will not indulge in such situations where the umpires or the match referee today are forced to act upon the rules that have been laid out for you. So, and these rules and the playing conditions are all formed from time to time, all depending upon what has gone past the previous season or the previous year. So that way, as of now, personally, if you ask me, I think what is existing, I think is sufficient enough. And I don't think that uh, anything, I can't foresee anything else happening, because you can't tell the future, but I don't foresee anything more, anything more than this can happen on the field of play, that way.
And Vedam, in these very testing times, we are going to have an IPL very soon without spectators. We have been watching cricket in England without spectators. So, what has been your experience? I mean, we have covered the matches in packed stadiums, and today getting to watch sport, not just cricket, without spectators. How do you feel?
Oh, I think it's atrocious. We should never get into this kind of situation at all, because I also understand COVID has really imposed a lot of restrictions on a lot of things. But sport needs to be enjoyed. Sports is something that you'd really like to go out there and enjoy. And now all of us realize that all these games and sports and other things that we are seeing, whether it is football or tennis or golf or cricket, is only for the sake of money. I mean, the boards need to make money. They need money to run the show. There's no doubt about it. So it's just to ensure that they make a lot of money and ensure that they can continue with the sport or with the game, maybe the next year or the following year. That's the only thing that I can see. I only hope it's only temporary phenomenon, and we get back to a lot of spectators with a lot of screaming, lot of cheering, lot of family outing. I hope cricket comes back to it. Not just cricket, a whole lot of other sports also come back to it, because sports has to be celebrated and enjoyed.
Yes, Shabir, would you agree? Sport has to be celebrated, yes, and
Of course.
spectator
I
is
mean,
is a necessary component of any sport.
obviously, I mean, you can imagine having 40, 50,000 people paying for your own country or your own team or whatever it be, your state, etc. Of course, the crowd plays a very, very large factor in the performance of a player. I definitely feel that. And because you can make out, I mean, like when you're playing without any background noise or sort of any spectators, especially even if you take your domestic cricket or something like that. I mean, today the charm is gone. I still remember about the early 70s and mid 70s when I used to go as a youngster to watch Ranji Trophy matches. I mean, there used to be huge crowds. So that gives the joy to the players and all the stakeholders. Basically, I would say all the stakeholders and moreover the players to enjoy that the game, and they get more charged up to give off their best, more than their best. So I think, and as Vedam said, I'm also keeping my fingers crossed. I hope in time to come, life itself and the game itself, cricket and the crowds come back again.
Yeah, I mean, Vedam quite similarly. I mean, we are now doing this Zoom call. Normally, we would have been in a big hall facing the audience, more interactive. I think there's time to take some questions. If
Yes.
we can have some.
Can we have Ram Kumar Kudlur, who has asked a couple of questions? If you can unmute yourself, Ram Kumar, and you can ask the panelists.
Hi, Lekha. This is Ram Kumar here. Thank you so much. So first up, congratulations, Vedam. I think this is indeed a well-researched book. And like as what Shabir was mentioning, you can come back to this chapter at any point in time and still stay glued onto the book. And I think that's probably for me one of the best aspects of the book that I was looking to. I mean, it doesn't allow you to shift away, even if you have to say, okay, let me read to another chapter, but I can still come back. That's a wonderful nature of this book. Thank you so much, Vedam. This is one question that has been in my mind for a very long time, right from the time I held the book in my hand. The book starts about courage, conviction, controversy in cricket. But the first chapter you've started to highlight on the controversy. Is there any reason that you've deviated, or if at all, if there is an intentional deviation to move away from the order of courage, conviction, and controversy?
First of all, thank you for all those nice things that you said. But yeah, actually, it is not a question of what we wanted to. I was trying to roll it in my mouth, controversies, conviction, and courage in cricket. How does that sound? Or is it conviction, courage, controversy, cricket? So the day we were just rolling it in the mouth, and suddenly we found that courage, conviction, controversy in cricket sounded better than the other way around. That's the only thing. But I spoke of the bodyline straight away because I think that made a lot of impact, not just in the laws of the game, but like I said, some of the things that cricket actually lived by, saying it's a gentleman's sport, etc., etc. I think that changed immediately. And the change was not now, the change was more than 100 years ago, even before the Second World War. So yeah, I think that's the reason I took that, but not for any other reason. Like I said, the name came later. Where do we fit courage? Where do we fit controversy? And where do we put conviction?
Okay.
Our next question will come from Sai Sham Shrikant. If Sai Sham can unmute himself and ask the question.
Hi, thank you so much, sir. I hope I can get a copy of the book soon. Sounds really interesting. But yeah, I was curious if you've been able to cover the mode of dismissal that we know as one card, which is actually run out at the non-strikers end. I'm sorry if you expected this question, but so is it one of the longest running controversies in our game? And why do you think it generates so much interest despite there being nothing really unlawful or unsporting about the mode of dismissal?
See, again, actually, Shabir should be answering this, but I'll just start off with this. I think we've got the wrong notion at all about it. If it is there in the laws, then it has to be followed. It's not me saying this. Don Bradman said this when the Brown runout took place. But now I think maybe Shabir would expand on this. The emphasis has changed. The emphasis is now actually on the non-striker to stay within. It's not a question of the bowler running him out. The emphasis is on the non-striker. My personal point is, if today, as per the protocol, the third umpire or the fourth umpire actually watches out for the no ball, each and every ball. I don't know if you followed the game which happened a couple of days at Australia match, Maxwell. They stopped Maxwell from bowling the third delivery or something of that because the TV umpire had not seen it. The previous one was a no ball. He was bowling it too quickly, so they stopped him. So my point is, if the TV umpire can watch every ball to find out whether it's a no ball or not, he can also ensure if the non-striker has moved out of the crease. He can't be running 16 yards and 17 yards
Correct.
after the ball has been delivered. But I think maybe Shabir can throw on the laws of the game of this.
Yeah, Saisham, actually, firstly, let me tell you that yes, this chapter is there in Vedam's book. Okay, it's involving Ashwin in the IPL game. So when you get the copy of the book, Saisham, it is there, so you can read it. Okay, now coming back to the laws of the game. See, laws of the game are made for all levels of cricket. I'm not. Firstly, there is a difference between laws of cricket and the playing conditions. Laws of cricket, of course, it is there that. Firstly, just getting back that the non-striker has no need or no reason to be out of his ground at any moment of time. He's also got to play the game. He's also got, as a non-striker, as a batsman, he has to be within his crease. And this issue about munkering over the years has only gone on and on only on one major point. Nobody's talking about whether it is right or wrong. The major issue about this is only whether it is under the spirit of the game. Everything, if you go through the law book itself, the law book itself starts with 2 chapters. One is the preamble of the game, and one is the spirit of the game. So there is a sentence where it says the game of cricket has to be played under these laws, which have been laid out. So if the law is there, I personally, and also being an umpire, I find no reason that the bowler should should be stopped from getting a batsman out at the non-striker's end. If he's doing something illegal, if he's not playing the game under the laws, he's also susceptible to a penalty as per the laws. I hope, Saisham, you've been convinced with that answer.
Can I also talk now?
Yeah, please go ahead and ask your question.
Yes,
Yeah.
please go ahead, Mr. Pillow.
I'm sorry if I've just intruded, but basically what we are forgetting, Vedam, when a non-striker takes those couple of sinful steps forward, he has reduced the length of the bowling pitch to the extent where it makes it easier for him to reach the other side. So, like Shabir says, if the umpire rules him out because he has been monkered, I don't think there needs to be any controversy about that. He was cheating. That's what Ian Chappell said, that when a non-striker steps out, even before he's supposed to, he's cheating. He's reducing the distance he has to run. And the second thing, Vedam, I've written in my note, this change in attitude by the prima donnas who sort of try to lord over the game, does it still make it a gentleman's game? I have given you 2 questions.
Yeah, Firoz, I don't know if you've read the book.
No, I'm not. I'm waiting for it to come my way.
Okay.
I'll give it to him.
I've brought out an instance in that book where the Sri Lankans were very unhappy in a one-day match against England, and they believed that England needed some 100-odd runs. And in the last 10 overs, they ran about 22 runs, 22 runs. And they were convinced that in every single one of them, the non-striker was taking a head start, and that's why they could never run him out. And they were very unhappy about it, and they mentioned it later. But I guess they should have run him out actually. But you're right, it reduces the distance considerably, and it should not be allowed at all. See, the question of gentleman's game, it's still a gentleman's game. That's what we'd all like to believe. And there's a lot of things in cricket which is absolutely unique to cricket. And I hope for the sake of cricket and for the sake of the values that we preserve or we cherish in this game, that those values stay. But you're absolutely right. What has happened is a lot of money has come in. People don't want to lose money. They don't want their careers to be cut short, and they're taking shortcuts. But again, it comes back to what are the values you're bringing to the table. But yeah, I would still love it to be a gentleman's game. And I still think that it is still a gentleman's game.
It is still a gentleman's game under the gambit of the laws that have been given to you. And I'm sure that everyone is playing it that way, barring for 1 or 2 stray incidents. I mean, like they say, every rule has an exception. So I think that's just a general rule that everyone follows.
An audience member with the username Galaxy Note 9, we're not able to see their name. Can you please unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Yeah, myself, Ramesh.
Yes, Ramesh, please go ahead.
Yeah, just a question to Mr. Savir that after the introduction of DRS, whether the umpiring is becoming easy, the umpire's job has become easy, or just taking an advantage. I'm not ignoring their roles or I'm not demotivating. Just asking a simple question because earlier by giving a wrong decision, the outcome of the game used to change. But nowadays, the umpires are not taking any risk. Even they are having even they are giving decision. After that, players can take DRS. So, can I get a clarification on this?
Yeah. See, actually, as I said earlier, also when DRS was introduced, there's a lot of people who didn't want it, wanted it, etc. But since I've had the opportunity of umpiring pre-DRS period and the DRS period, again, this is a change that we all had to undergo, all umpires and all stakeholders of the game. But by the time I finished umpiring, I felt that there are two reasons that DRS has really done a lot for the game. One is it has brought in players are ready to accept what is whatever decision is being given because now the right belongs to them at the moment to go for the DRS or not. And from the umpiring point of view, yes, I personally found that umpiring because it gave you more confidence knowing in yourself that you may make a mistake, but then finally the right decision comes out if the DRS is used by the players. So I personally, by the time I finished umpiring in 2017, I felt very comfortable umpiring when there was DRS.
Okay. Satyanarayana, will you ask your question?
Yeah. Hi Vedam, hi Vijay, this is Satya here. The question what I want to ask is, when the match fixing scandal actually broke out, it was because of one of the Delhi inspectors overhearing some chat, and the bookie was chatting with Hansi or something. The question what I want to ask is, both you guys are such experienced journalists, have covered cricket all over the world. How easy or difficult it is for a journalist, for a cricket writer, to spot any fixing on the field? I mean, by way of their actions, by way of their the play which you see day in and day out. Is it at all possible? Because I always feel that this betting, the fixing should have been exposed by maybe one of the cricket writers, but it didn't happen that way. So I just want to know your views on how easy or how difficult it is to spot fixing.
Yeah, look, we knew there was whispers, we knew such things were happening, but please remember, Satya, that we were bound by certain restrictions as far as the reporting was concerned, and it could have been libelous. We couldn't have we couldn't have pointed fingers without evidence, because any cricketer would have stood up and said, how can you level such allegations? And ultimately, it needed police to unearth. It needed phone tapping. It came through official sources. Phone tapping, we knew. There were cricketers who would say, why can't the phones be tapped? But that was something for the authorities to do. Newspaper people cannot tap telephones, or, there were some, then later on, of course, we had these incidents where media would have these, they would record on the sly and expose many, not in cricket, of course. I mean, there was, Manoj Prabhakar went on a spree. He tried his best, but it was very difficult to put it officially without evidence. So, I mean, Vedam was there with me. We were together there in 1997. There were whispers of match fixing, but I mean, we could have written it subtly, but not very openly.
Right. Adya has a question. Adya Sharma.
Hi everyone. My question is for all three. Do you think players who've been banned from match fixing or spot fixing deserve a second chance to return to the game?
Is it aimed at any particular, or anybody takes it?
It's for all three. It's for all three.
Yes, Vedam, you can go ahead. You answer this.
Okay, look, my personal view is he should not get a second chance, whoever it is. he should not get a second chance. Because I'll tell you why. These values are actually imbibed because right from a young age, you are learned how to lie and cheat. And that cheating starts with age. You know, the age cheating is tremendous in India, not just in cricket, in most of the other sports also. So when you start cheating at that age, you know that you are not, let's say, because you're older than the other boys. Now, after some time, when you feel that you've got limitation, because as you say, an 18, 19-year-old boy has to be able to play with the men. That's how the game is. But later, when you get to know that you can't keep up with that, then maybe you take to drugs to enhance your strength, enhance whatever. At the same time, you also know that you're still not good enough, and it's because of some external factor, either age earlier, now drugs or something else. And that's when you start doing this kind of cheating. So the cheating is not a one-off. The cheating is right from a very young age. And if somebody is caught, especially at that level, he should be banned for life. He should not come back.
Okay, I'm going to read out Ram's question. Is there any law proving mankading as a legal option for the bowlers? What R. Ashwin did against Joss Butler in IPL shows true spirit?
We have one answered about the mankading already.
Yeah. Okay.
But there is a law. There's definitely there is a law which sort of a bowler can run out the non-striker. Because the law states that the non-striker should not leave his crease till the ball is delivered. So I think we have already answered that question.
Okay, great. Thanks, Shabir. I think I'm trying to get Vijay Balakrishnan on
Balakrishnan.
He seems to have an older version of Zoom. So I'm going to read out his question. One of the biggest open controversies still around in Shroud is the controversial sealed envelope with the Supreme Court post the IPL betting scam instituted by the COA under Justice Mudgal and Justice Lodha. Have you written about it? Will it ever be disclosed or remain classified forever? Rumor has it that some of the biggest icons and names in Indian cricket could figure in those sealed contents and damage BCCI and Indian cricket. What are your views on this?
Vijay, you want to go on that? You're in Delhi.
It's about the envelope, right?
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
It's a sub judice. I mean, how can I or you or Vedam or Shabir comment on this? Because it's with the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is best knows when to open the envelope. So we should leave it to the Supreme Court, I think. It would be unfair to speculate.
Mr. Madappa's question goes like this. What was the pre-declaration understanding or team instructions related to the declaration against Pakistan with Sachin on 194? To him, to Mr. Madappa, that declaration was a standout example of putting a team or country's cause above that of the individual. Would any of you like to comment on this?
Yeah, I think we've already touched on this, and yeah, he's absolutely right. It puts the team above the individual, and that's how it should be.
Can I just push in a question by
yes, please. Yeah.
My former colleague?
Yeah, sure.
Parangi, he's with the Hindu in Calcutta.
Yeah.
He wants to know which chapter brings out the courage story best in your book.
I would say both B.S. Chandrasekhar and Tiger Pataudi, because the Tiger Pataudi, what Ian Chappell said, is absolutely spot on. He says, just close one eye and see if you can catch a ball, you know, and he's absolutely spot on. And with one eye, to have played against the greatest of fast bowlers like Andy Roberts and a whole lot of others, Mackenzie, and he played a whole lot of others. That was some extraordinary courage, you know, to really go for it. And the same with Chandra. Chandra with a polio-afflicted hand, for him to play and play for so long and be such a great match winner, that was absolute courage. There's no doubt about it.
Shrikant, Gururaj, yes.
Hello, thank you. You know, we're talking about controversies, and I'm curious to know, going back to one of the earliest ones, what the esteemed panel here feels about the Manoj Prabhakar accusations and allegations and suspicion surrounding Kapil Dev going back almost 20 plus years. That was seminal and something very critical to the whole match fixing sort of atmosphere.
But like I said, many countries have come with a lot of inquiry commission reports, and we have to go like only on what the reports say and what there have been allegations, and many allegations about X, Y, Z, and we really can't go on those allegations. See, the law of the land is very clear. You are innocent until you are proven guilty. So unless somebody is proven guilty or the inquiry commission pegs a blame on somebody, we can't go around. They just aspersions. You don't know why they cast aspersions. Maybe he didn't like him. He didn't. Whatever. I don't want to get into that. But yeah, unless it's proved, I don't think we can even comment on it.
Yeah, Vidyasagar, again, could you highlight the difference between courage and conviction? Vedam?
Yeah, courage and conviction. Actually, you can have the courage of conviction. That's one thing. The second thing is courage is, the raw courage that you have, maybe to a physical threat, like say, for instance, either Chandra or Pataudi or even Rick McCosker, who came back and played. I mean, amazing for him to have broken his jaw and come back and bat it, And in fact, the non-striker Rodney Marsh didn't want him. He said to get lost. He said, get out from here. I don't want to see you. That was raw courage. Conviction is something like what Rahul Dravid did. You can extend it to courage of your conviction, but conviction is what somebody like Rahul Dravid did, declaring at that stage of the innings and pulling off a great victory. So yeah, they actually may sound the same, but they come a little from a different perspectives.
And there's a question from Bhavika Dhyani Vedam. She wants to know, good evening, sir. I heard about cricket that always cricket is pre-planned. Is it true? So I think it's already been answered.
The last question is from Mr. Venkat Narayan. I'll just read it out. As seasoned journalists now, you all have been close to players. How much have you grown personally, in the sense, how much have you personally been inspired by them? And this is the last question of the evening.
Well, I would like to say one thing, and I'm sure I speak for Vijay also in this. While we love the game, we are not fans. We are reporters and we are journalists. And I think being a good professional journalist is when you are not a fan. A fan is somebody who's fanatical and who will forgive his hero anything. But as a true journalist, a professional journalist, we don't really, we have to call out what the wrongs that they do. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm sure Vijay also would be the same. While we admire a lot of cricketers, we are really not their fans. We are fans of the game. But yeah, if they do something wrong, we have to call it out. And let's not forget that it's only the fans who are fanatical. He will forgive his hero anything. He can do anything wrong and you'll still forgive him. But that's not the case here. So I think we brought a lot of professionalism into reporting and into what we did. I don't know how long that kind of approach is going to remain, because the entire ecosystem has changed. It is not how we played the game or how we watched the game or how we reported the game. There's a tremendous amount of change which is going on, and not all of it is good.
I would just like to add, Vedam, that and Shabir, I would share that I would be a fan for a while when covering a match. I would go and sit in the stand with the spectators. I would become a fan. But once back in the press box, sitting on my typewriter or my laptop, then I would definitely would become a journalist with a very, unbiased view. And I've had, and even Vedam has done that. We have criticized some of our cricketer friends also.
On that note, thank you so much for such a great conversation, Shabir, Vijay, and Vedam. And thank you so much, audiences, for joining us. This video will be available on YouTube, and those of you who would have registered will receive the link. Thank you again.
Thank you, Vedam. Thanks, Vijay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Raghu. Everybody. Thank you very much.